On April 25th, Ukraine said it had carried out a long-range UAV strike deep inside Russian territory. In the first hours, the location of the target alone was enough to draw immediate global attention worldwide across major news outlets. This was not the front line, not Crimea, and not the areas that had been regularly hit in previous strikes. The target was in Chelyabinsk, about 1,700 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. For most of the war, that distance had been seen as a relatively safe zone for Russia's most important military assets. But once attacks begin to appear at that range, that logic starts to break down. A larger question begins to form, not only about this strike, but about how the war is now being fought. If a base that far away can still be reached, how effective is Russia's defensive depth? And why did Chelyabinsk become the place where this problem first came into view? Let's break it down with military force. On April 25, 2026, Ukraine said its long-range drones struck Chelyabinsk Air Base in Russia's Chelyabinsk region, and the distance alone changed the meaning of the attack. Chelyabinsk is roughly 1,700 kilometers from Ukraine's border, far beyond the usual images of trench lines, border towns, and occupied territory. For Russia, that distance was supposed to matter. It meant time, space, warning, and a deeper rear area where important aircraft could be kept away from the daily pressure of the front. Yet the reported strike suggests that this protective space is no longer as firm as Moscow may have believed. This is why the event reaches beyond one airfield. In a normal battlefield map, the front line is the place where danger is expected. Behind it sits the support zone, then the logistics network, then the deeper military interior. Chelyabinsk belongs to that deeper layer. When a base in that layer becomes reachable, the war no longer looks like a narrow fight along a fixed line. It begins to look like a wider contest over distance, detection, and the ability to defend valuable assets across a very large country. The message is not that every Russian base is now exposed in the same way. That would go too far. Long-range drone attacks still depend on route planning, air defense gaps, weather, intelligence, and luck. Many drones can be intercepted before reaching their targets. But Ukraine does not need every drone to arrive. A small number getting through can force Russia to spend far more resources protecting sites that once required less attention. For Moscow, this creates a difficult security problem. If Chelyabinsk can be reached, commanders must ask how many other airfields need stronger protection, more radar coverage, more electronic warfare systems, more shelters, and more air defense crews. Each answer costs money, equipment, and manpower. Each new protected zone also pulls attention away from other parts of the war. The deeper issue is psychological as much as military. A country at war depends on the belief that some areas remain behind the battle. That belief helps sustain logistics, training, maintenance, and command routines. Once deep rear bases feel vulnerable, routine movement becomes harder, and commanders may begin to act more cautiously. Chelyabinsk therefore raises one central question for Russia. If depth no longer guarantees safety, how far must Moscow stretch its defenses to protect the air power behind the front? But to understand why this strike carried such weight, the next step is to examine the aircraft Ukraine said were hit inside Russia's wider war machine in this wider conflict today. The reported targets at Chelyabinsk mattered because they pointed to two different layers of Russian air power. Ukraine said the strike involved Su-57 fighters and at least one Su-34 fighter bomber. That combination gives the story more weight than a normal attack on parked aircraft. The Su-57 is not just another combat jet in Russian service. It is Russia's most advanced fifth-generation fighter. It was built to project the image of a modern air force able to compete with the best aircraft in the world. Moscow has used it carefully. It has often been kept away from the most dangerous airspace. Losing one would carry a cost beyond the aircraft itself. The Su-57 carries political value as well as military value. It is linked to Russian claims about stealth design, advanced sensors, and long-range weapons. It is also connected to future air combat plans. Even if its battlefield role in Ukraine has been limited compared with older aircraft, its symbolic weight remains very high. It tells audiences at home and abroad that Russia still belongs in the top tier of military aviation. A strike near this aircraft therefore threatens an image that Moscow has spent years trying to build. This is why the Su-57 matters before the damage assessment is complete. It is rare, it is expensive, it is tied to national prestige. When such an aircraft is placed within reach of Ukrainian drones, the message goes beyond one airframe. It raises questions about how secure Russia's most protected military assets really are. The Su-34 belongs to a different part of the conflict. It is less symbolic than the Su-57. It is more directly tied to the daily pressure felt by Ukrainian forces in cities. Russia has used Su-34 aircraft to launch guided bombs and standoff weapons. These strikes are often carried out from outside the most dangerous zones of Ukrainian air defense. These aircraft help Russia maintain air pressure on the battlefield. They also reduce risk to pilots and crews. In many parts of the war, the Su-34 has become a flying platform for delivering heavy munitions. It releases weapons and then turns away from danger. For Ukrainian defenders, the Su-34 represents a constant threat. Guided bombs can damage trenches, command posts, roads, and buildings. They do not require Russian aircraft to fly directly over the target. Repeated strikes can weaken defenses before ground forces move forward. This does not mean every mission changes the outcome of a battle, but it creates a steady level of pressure over time. This is what makes the reported mix of targets important. The Su-57 represents prestige and advanced military technology. The Su-34 represents practical strike capacity on the battlefield. One aircraft reflects Russia's long-term military image. The other reflects the current rhythm of combat operations. A strike involving both types sends a layered message. It suggests that rare and expensive aircraft are not safe simply because they are kept far from the front. It also suggests that aircraft used for daily combat missions can be threatened before they even take off. This changes how air power risk is understood. The danger does not begin in the sky. It can begin on the ground, inside the base. This does not require exaggeration. The full scale of damage still needs to be assessed. But the target list alone explains why Chelyabinsk drew attention. Ukraine did not describe a strike on low-value equipment. It described a strike near assets that sit at the center of Russia's air power. However, the value of the attack does not rest only on the names Su-57 and Su-34. The next question is more difficult. It will decide how serious the incident becomes for Moscow. How much damage was actually done? Ukraine's updated account suggested that the Chelyabinsk strike may have affected more aircraft than first reported. The list included 2 Su-57 fighters, 1 Su-34 fighter bomber, and 1 unidentified Sukhoi aircraft. That turns the incident from a possible single aircraft case into a wider airbase problem. The word affected must be handled carefully. It does not automatically mean every aircraft was destroyed. In wartime reporting, a jet can be counted as affected for several reasons. It may suffer shrapnel damage, blast pressure, nearby fire exposure, or debris impact around sensitive systems. Engines, sensors, fuel lines, control surfaces, and landing gear can require inspection even when the aircraft looks intact. The claim is serious because of the aircraft named, but the final condition of each airframe remains unclear. The point is not to lower the importance of the strike, but to describe it with discipline. The exact level of damage at Chelyabinsk remains uncertain, and that uncertainty is normal after a deep strike. Military damage assessment takes time, especially when the target is far inside enemy territory. Satellite images can show craters, burn marks, damaged surfaces, and changed parking positions. But overhead images cannot always prove whether a combat jet can safely fly again. A modern aircraft may look repairable from above while hiding internal problems. A radar unit, hydraulic line, engine intake, wiring system, or electronic bay can be damaged without leaving a clear mark. That is why a careful report must separate three possible outcomes. One aircraft can be destroyed. Another can be damaged beyond quick repair. A third can be grounded while technicians inspect it. These results are different, but each can affect readiness. Limited damage can create pressure if it removes aircraft from service for days, weeks, or longer. Modern combat aircraft are not simple machines. They need mechanics, spare parts, test equipment, hangar space, and time. If a Su-57 or Su-34 needs deep inspection after a drone strike, it cannot return to duty because the outer frame appears acceptable. Crews must confirm that the aircraft can carry weapons, communicate with other systems, handle flight stress, and operate safely. The visible damage may be one problem, while the hidden maintenance burden may be another. A grounded aircraft still consumes manpower, planning time, and technical attention. It can force commanders to adjust mission schedules, move other aircraft, or accept fewer available platforms. That is why uncertainty itself has value. It forces Russia to check, repair, protect, and plan around risk before final figures are public. The safest conclusion is not that 4 aircraft were destroyed. The stronger conclusion is that Ukraine claims 4 aircraft were affected, while the final condition of each remains under assessment. That wording keeps the analysis accurate without making the strike look smaller than it is. The incident still matters because the target set included rare and valuable aircraft. Repairable damage can interrupt readiness, expose weaknesses in base protection, and force Russia to review high-value storage. In this kind of war, the line between destruction and disruption is important. Destruction removes a platform permanently. Disruption can slow operations, complicate planning, and create defensive costs. For Ukraine, the Chelyabinsk strike fits this logic. It did not need to prove total destruction immediately to create pressure. It only needed to show that aircraft once considered protected could be placed at risk far from the front. Even though the final damage picture is unclear, the distance involved has turned Chelyabinsk into a warning signal for Moscow. The Chelyabinsk strike stands out because of the distance involved. A target 1,700 kilometers from Ukraine's border is not part of the battlefield picture. It sits beyond trenches, artillery zones, and border regions that define war. That distance gives the strike strategic meaning. Ukraine shows that long-range pressure can move from nearby sites toward air bases once seen as safer inside Russia. This does not mean every deep base is exposed equally, but it does mean Moscow must treat distance as less reliable than before. A rear area can no longer be judged only by how far it is from the front. It must also be judged by drone range, air defense coverage, intelligence leaks, and detection of small threats. That change forces Russia to think about depth not as protection, but as space that must be actively watched. An attack on an airbase can create problems even when damage is limited. Aircraft do not operate alone. They depend on fuel trucks, maintenance teams, weapons storage, runway access, communication links, shelters, and parking zones. If drones reach Chelyabinsk, commanders must review every part of that system. They may need to move aircraft to other locations. They may need to reduce visible parking. They may need to change maintenance schedules. They may also need to keep more crews on alert, which adds fatigue and pressure. Even a short disruption can matter when a military depends on repeated air missions. A delayed inspection can slow readiness. A changed deployment plan can reduce flexibility. This is how one strike can affect the rhythm of air operations beyond the blast area. The deeper challenge for Russia is the size of the defensive map Moscow may now need to protect. Air defense is not unlimited. radar systems, missile batteries, electronic warfare units, trained crews, and technical teams cannot be placed everywhere at full strength. If more deep airfields need protection, those resources must come from somewhere. Some may be moved from border regions. Some may be pulled from other military sites. Some may be stretched across too many locations. Russia can concentrate defenses around the most valuable bases and leave others exposed. Or it can spread protection widely and risk making each layer thinner. Neither option is easy during a long war. That is why the distance matters so much. It turns one reported strike into a question about the whole defensive system. The battlefield is no longer measured only by where soldiers are fighting. It is also measured by where aircraft can be stored, serviced, armed, and protected. If deep bases operate under new risk, Russia may have to build shelters, disperse aircraft, increase patrols, and expand surveillance. Each step takes money, manpower, and time. Each added layer also competes with needs closer to the front. This is the quiet effect of long-range strikes. They may not always destroy large numbers of aircraft, but they can force the enemy to spend heavily, move cautiously, and defend more space. Chelyabinsk became more than a location on a map. It became a warning that Russia's rear is harder to keep calm. From that point, the most serious question turns toward the Su-57, because this is not a weapon Russia can replace quickly after a damaging strike. If the Su-57 at Chelyabinsk was seriously damaged or impossible to repair, the loss would be much larger than one aircraft on a parking apron. The Su-57 is not a mass-produced battlefield tool that Russia can replace after a bad night. It is a rare fifth-generation fighter, and every available airframe represents years of design work, testing, funding, factory time, and technical labor. Russia can replace some battlefield items faster than others. A drone can be built in large batches. A truck can be pulled from storage. A shell can be produced in huge numbers if the industrial base has materials and workers. But a Su-57 belongs to a different category. It requires specialized components, trained engineers, advanced engines, radar systems, flight control software, and a production line that cannot be expanded overnight. Losing access to one aircraft can create pressure beyond the repair bill. A heavily damaged Su-57 can create a chain of hidden costs. Technicians must inspect the frame, engine bay, sensors, wiring, landing gear, and weapon systems. If heat, shrapnel, or blast pressure reached sensitive areas, repair can become slow and difficult. Even if the aircraft is not written off, it may stay grounded while parts are replaced and safety checks are completed. During that period, Russia loses not only the machine, but also the option to use it. Advanced aircraft are meant to give commanders choices. They can carry modern weapons, test tactics, support deterrence, and show capacity. When one aircraft is removed from service, the effect is felt in planning rooms as much as on the runway. Commanders may protect the remaining jets more carefully. They may limit exposure or move aircraft between bases. Each choice can reduce flexibility. It can also force crews to rely more heavily on other aircraft, increasing wear on platforms already in demand. The image cost is just as serious. The Su-57 has been presented as proof that Russia remains a major aviation power. It is supposed to show that Moscow can design and field aircraft in the same elite category as advanced militaries. If such a jet can be damaged deep inside Russia, the message becomes uncomfortable. It suggests that prestige weapons are not protected by distance alone. It also shows that Ukraine is not only striking expendable targets, but reaching toward assets Moscow would prefer to keep away from danger. This is why possible damage to a Su-57 carries a double burden. Militarily, it can reduce availability and create repair pressure. Politically, it can weaken the story of protected strength around Russia's most advanced aircraft. The physical damage may still need confirmation, but reputational damage begins when the aircraft is named. For a weapons program built partly on prestige, perception matters. Even uncertainty can weaken confidence if Moscow cannot clearly show that the aircraft survived without serious harm. Because the Su-57 carries such symbolic value, Moscow's unclear response becomes part of the story itself after Chelyabinsk today. Russia's unclear response to the Chelyabinsk strike fits the logic of information control during wartime. When a state suffers possible damage to a high-value asset, the first public reaction is often limited, delayed, or carefully shaped. This does not prove damage was severe. It shows Moscow has reasons to manage the story closely. The Su-57 makes that control important. This aircraft is not only a weapon, it is also a symbol of Russian engineering, air power, and national prestige. If Moscow confirmed serious damage, the political effect could be larger than the physical loss itself. A damaged symbol can weaken confidence at home and invite questions abroad. That is why silence or vague language can become part of the battle after the strike. Chelyabinsk also fits a wider pattern in Ukraine's long-range campaign. Earlier strikes often focused on oil facilities, fuel depots, ammunition sites, logistics nodes, and other targets that support Russia's war economy. Those targets matter because they feed the front with fuel, weapons, and supplies. But an air base with advanced aircraft belongs to a different level of pressure. It touches the systems Russia uses to project air power, support battlefield attacks, and protect the image of a modern military. By reaching aviation assets, Ukraine signals that its campaign is not limited to supply lines. It is also testing the deeper military structure behind Russian operations. This does not require Ukraine to destroy many aircraft in one strike. One breach can force new calculations. One threatened asset can make commanders review storage, dispersal, air defense, and base security. For Russia, the problem is no longer only how to defend areas close to Ukraine. The question is how to protect valuable targets across a wider space. More radar coverage, air defense crews, electronic warfare systems, and shelters demand resources. If those resources move deeper into Russia, other zones may receive less attention. If they stay near the front, rear bases may remain exposed. This is the pressure Ukraine is trying to create. A few drones getting through can create an effect larger than their cost. They can force Russia to spend more, guard more, and move with more caution. Chelyabinsk points beyond one reported airfield attack. It suggests that war is moving deeper into Russia's military interior. Chelyabinsk is not only a story about one airbase or several aircraft under threat. It is a sign that Ukraine's long-range campaign is pushing the war into places Russia once treated as protected space. If the reported damage to Su-57 and Su-34 aircraft is fully confirmed, the strike will carry military, psychological, and political weight at the same time. For Moscow, the answer cannot be simple. More air defenses, more shelters, wider dispersal, and tighter base security may reduce risk. But each measure costs money, manpower, missiles, radar coverage, and time. That burden matters in a long war where every defensive layer added in the rear competes with needs near the front. The larger question now is not whether one strike changed the war overnight. It is how far Russia must stretch itself to keep its most valuable military assets safe. War is not only about weapons and strategy, it is also about the long-term cost carried by nations, soldiers, and civilians. Understanding these events helps explain why modern conflicts are becoming more complex and why maintaining peace is increasingly difficult. Subscribe to Military Force for clear, fact-based analysis on war, geopolitics, and the forces shaping global security.